apart. There were few not really good examples of stereotyping Emiratis, saying Emiratis, we don't work, we don't show up at work, we just want a title and a high salary, and we don't want to be told what to do, which is sometimes true. But I argue back and asking a lot of people in your country, don't you have good talent that is really hardworking and not really good talent? And following up on that comment, saying, how did a country in 50 years become the way we are if we don't have local talent?
The system has been set up with, as I kind of mentioned, with there's fines if you don't do this. And so people are ticking boxes. And so essentially what that's doing is actually creating this resentment towards it, when in reality, what we need is and I do a lot of work in this in terms of like, what is the purpose of this?
It's like if we can move away from those blind ideas and move into integration and really embodying this in organisations, then we're more likely to be able to fulfil that balance, right, between talent for the economy and the localisation piece.
Welcome to the Wellbeing Leaders Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things wellbeing and leadership. We are your hosts. I am Sam Harvey.
And I'm Charlotte Stebbing-Mills, and today we are joined by the wonderful Fatima Alloghani, who is the founder of Born to Localize. She is a distinguished leader in Emiratization strategy, over 20 years of multi-industry experience and working with some of the most renowned organisations in this region. And today we're here to talk about the link between Emiratization and well-being in the workplace. Welcome to the show, Fatima.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Charlotte. I'm excited about what we're going to share and have a conversation about.
Yeah, me too. In fact, we literally just said, right, let's make sure we record this. I'm super excited about this, to hear your perspective and how we can link those two things, right? Because I don't think that's a topic that we're speaking enough about. Do you agree?
I 100% agree, but allow me to compliment Charlotte, because she introduced me in a way where I felt like I could really use that in my marketing campaign, introducing Born to Localize. Charlotte, thank you very much for the amazing introduction. I am impressed with your energy, actually, in terms of the subject and the introduction at the same time.
Well, energy is something that's super important to us, and that was one of the reasons why, for me in particular, I thought it was important to bring you on the show, because I obviously connected with you at an event earlier in the year in Dubai, and you were sharing really like your journey and then how that's led into what you do today. So I'd love for us to perhaps start there. Would you mind sharing, what's been your personal journey, perhaps, and professional journey that's really now being channeled into what you do?
Thanks, Charlotte. And also wanted to go back to Sam as well, when he was telling me before we record how interested he is in diversity and inclusion. But to begin with, my name is Fatima Alloghani. I come from a very small town called Kelba, which is very far away from big cities like Dubai, where I live right now. I grew up with nearly 19 siblings. We are 21 right now. So I have 10 brothers and 10 sisters. My father loved women. He's not here anymore, but he loved women, so he married 4. And he wanted more kids to carry his name, so he populated 21 children after he passed.
Wow.
And living in such an environment makes it very hard for a kid to be noticed or distinguished. So I spent up my entire childhood trying to gain my father's love and respect and attention, and therefore I was the most troublemaker among all the girls he had. But I was also extremely great in my school and my talent. So I played gymnastics, I participated in volleyball, table tennis, and be it. So I was multi-talented when I was younger, and I could get away from trouble, let's say, for example, because of my charm and because of my grades in school. So he would let me be most of the times, even if I needed to be, to be told off. And with that, I really also thought it's extremely important to share that I'm half Emirati, half Indian. So if you could see, and I don't know if you really noticed, but I carry with me some Asian features as well, not necessarily completely Emiratis. But the beautiful thing, we've been brought up to be 100% Emiratis. Growing up further within the school or among my own siblings, I felt there were moments where I was treated a little bit different. if not less, because I was half. I was not like fully Emirati. But it's not a subject that is popular right now, because the population and the youth and the young ones of the United Arab Emirates, although they come from pure or an amazing mix, we don't carry these conversations anymore. And I can see it with my children. So I'm very glad to hear that. But it was worth mentioning it, because we're going to tap in diversity and inclusion later. And I realized that for my entire life, I've been trying just to be distinguished or with special. So I chose really crazy paths in my life, whether it's a career away from home, because I went all the way to Abu Dhabi and I took a first job with a multinational in oil and gas. And I was the first Emirati woman they hired in their office back in 2002. I was also posted to work in Oman. So imagine at 24, I drive between the UAE and Oman for work, which was extremely unheard of at that point of time. When I grew up a little bit older, then I made the most radical decision ever in my life to marry somebody who's not an Emirati. And I fell in love with a Scandinavian guy who's 2 meters tall, white, blue eyes, and blonde. And I left everything for him. I have two girls, beautiful girls with him right now. And they are also a product of more diversified let's say set of genes. And after 20 years, jumping between different sectors and working with the HR and working with the diversity and inclusion, I fell in love with the concept itself. So one of the biggest highlights is recently, or in the past 10 years, I specialized in something called Emiratization. I also managed to pull an inclusion program for a World Expo, Mega Event Expo 2020, which was the first of its kind. And with that, I decided to venture alone and make sure that I can really support further organizations and agendas when it comes to diversity and inclusion, be it diversity of, be it generally in diversity or equality or inclusion, which is Emiratization is part of it.
Love that. Love that. And can you tell me this like I'm a 5-year-old? What exactly is Emiratization?
Oh, wow. The way I explain it, Sam, is where do you come from? You come from the UK.
No, I'm from New Zealand.
So imagine all these multinationals come to your land. From?
From New Zealand.
Where are you from?
New
New
Zealand.
Zealand. Okay, let's talk about New Zealand, because you're a Kiwi.
Yeah, I'm a Kiwi. Yeah.
Fantastic. So imagine you have a lot of industries and multinationals, foreign multinationals come to New Zealand, and they open their companies and they operate. And they bring their own people to come and work on your land. But the Kiwi people don't get any opportunity to work with them. And they end up either jobless and not contributing to the total evolution of the economy of your country.
Gotcha.
And Emiratization is not very far, or including local talent is not very far from this concept. So Emiratization is creating opportunities for local people in the UAE to play a part in the private sectors, where it was not the norm in the past.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. That breaks it down really well.
I don't know if that's a 5-year-old explanation, but I try.
No, it's good. Maybe an 8-year-old, but I can manage with that for sure. So yeah, no, thank you very much. And that putting it in my own context is really useful. So thank you. Yeah.
I think it's super interesting. Like, obviously, you just mentioned like New Zealand there. Obviously, I'm from the UK, and I don't know, maybe I'm being really ignorant here, but I don't know that we have something called Britishization or anything like that. So is this something that is global? Is this something that the UAE is doing particularly well? I know obviously Saudi are also focused on Saudiization also, and I completely understand why, but I'm curious to know like perhaps some of the distinctions as to globally what's happening.
Yeah, in my own understanding, also living in Denmark and struggling to find a job there, I can really share some. I believe the labor market setup in the world is a little bit different than our region, be it because in the UK you are they give you either citizenship or you become a taxpayer. So whatever income you make, you contribute it back to the government, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you have equal right across different healthcare, education, and everything else, because you pay for that. Well, in the UAE or in this region, it's not the case anymore. And the government find themselves responsible to look after their own people, because we don't have income tax yet. So the equal right opportunity when we say about talent and jobs is a little bit different. And in the past 40 years, the UAE, most of the GCC countries, left it to the sector, the private sector, to come and operate and make profit and try to create a coexisting nature here for everybody to live and thrive. But what we have noticed is, unfortunately, we've realized these companies are extending their recruitment and talent, importing from outside, from a continent that probably they're more acquainted with, or from the countries they come from, or they're trying to look also for economical decision when it comes to importing cheap labor into this part of the world. And Emiratis, although we are niche and we are like a really small population, but still we come from a quite well-off welfare system, and we're not very cheap. So from that perspective, the labor law in 1980 stated the law saying any opportunity in the private sector should be prioritized for Emirati. But we did not see the sector falling into fulfilling that. There were some companies where did it nicely and kindly, but you see the evolution in the past 20 years to impose laws when it comes to banking sectors, insurance, and at the same time, tourism. And I believe the output of the education system brought a lot of Emiratis that were struggling to find a job, and they prefer to work somewhere else in a more safe environment like the government sector. So the gap became bigger than the willingness of the private sector to have an Emirati on board, and also Emiratis not really feeling interested or motivated to be in the private sector. In the past 4 years, and despite all the attempts that the country were doing to close the gap, NAFIS initiative came in 2021. It's part of the project of the Next 50 for the development of the United Arab Emirates, and it was very much dedicated and concerning the Emirati talent existence in the private sector and participation at the same time. So one of the initiatives started substituting salaries. So they're saying, okay, you are a private sector, you cannot pay this amount of money for Emiratis, or you cannot afford them. We will support you for the next 5 years and top up. Right. So the minimum salary is governed by the ministry is 4,000 dirhams, and everything else is substituted and beefed by NAFIS, or by the country. So the initiative started in 2021, and soon after, 6 months later, I believe the ministry were looking at their numbers and have realized the sector is not picking up, even with the support they were giving. And in May 2022, they started imposing quotas and fines. And only then, for the first time ever in my life and in my career, I could see spike in the number of Emiratis in the private sector, which is nearly approximately 10% increase since the start of NAFIS.
That's super interesting, isn't it? Because we're thinking about incentivization there, aren't we? And there's always that's the carrot and stick approach. So the stick has worked essentially, in that, like, hey, if you don't do this, we will fine you. But I'm interested as to why you think that the private sector weren't. Because in reality, if they're importing labor from the UK, the US, etc., it's expensive too, right? Like, it's probably on par, you would have thought, or thereabouts. So why is it that people aren't wanting to diversify and bring Emiratis into their business?
Okay, fair question. In my opinion, there are different aspects of this. Number one, I believe companies feel very comfortable with nationalities they know and they worked with.
Yeah.
Number two, Emiratis, we did not do ourselves a great favor because we are quite pampered and we are used to short working hours, great titles, and a good amount of salary and holidays time, which is the private sector do not offer. So Emiratis felt very comfortable in the applying and working for the government. So the motivation to come and knock doors of the private sector weren't like strong enough. And number three, I also understand that there were a kind of stereotyping and fear. There were a lot of taboos about coming and talking to, for example, addressing Emirati men or Emirati women on the way. And I believe a lot of expatriates come with that mindset of saying, "Oh my God, these are the untouchable. We should not speak with them because we might end up in trouble or saying something wrong." So the understanding the culture of Emiratis and feeling comfortable bringing them in to be part of their workforce also played a part. There were few not really good examples of stereotyping Emiratis, saying Emiratis, we don't work, we don't show up at work, we just want a title and a high salary, and we don't want to be told what to do, which is sometimes true. But I argue back and asking a lot of people in your country, don't you have good talent that is really hardworking and not really good talent? And following up on that comment, saying, how did the country in 50 years become the way we are if we don't have local talent and leaders that made it become the way it is? And the fourth one that I really wanted to address is the output of the education system, unfortunately, was not fast enough to support the evolution of the private sector, because they wanted the skills that they really wanted changed tremendously. And the private sector, I must say, because I cannot blame the education system, and this is a worldwide problem, is not very well in dialogue and in integration with the universities here to produce an output and create that programs that bring Emirati straight to the private sectors only recently under NAFIS, I must say.
Yeah, great point.
I wonder then, Fatima, like, what are you seeing? So for the organisations that are hitting their quotas and that are really showing up and they're really being inclusive, what are you noticing around the impact that's having on well-being generally across the workforce?
Let me share with you an insight first before we assume that the companies were successful in assuming or being successful. I always have a critical comment about the Emiratization and the way people look at it. Number one, let's set the stage. So Emiratization is not about how many Emiratis did you hire, because you can hire 100 Emirati today and you achieve your quota, and then 60% or 60 of them leaves you the next day. Yep. And you go back stressed about backfilling and refilling. I really honestly think the whole notion of the Emiratization have to change, and it becomes like inclusion, equality, and diversity programs, because there are many attributes that comes around them. It's not only about the number of people you bring or the women you promote or the opportunity you create for people that are, let's say, people of determination or underprivileged. It's about how well integrated they are in the whole ecosystem of employment that you really have. So the story maybe begins with you hiring, but it shouldn't end after you hire and you think you have done and achieved, fulfilled. So we really need to change that understanding. It's the whole employment experience from hire to retire that have to be addressed when we talk about Emiratization. So that's number one. Number two, there was, in the past 3 years, there was tremendous amount of stress on organization, let alone the mental health impact after the COVID, because the COVID nearly was fading away after the 2021, 2022. And also at the same time, this initiative really started on organizations. So I feel really sorry for organizations and talent or people juggling between their mental health and what happened to them with the COVID, and also at the same time with this HR stress, because it became a mandate not only of the leaders of the organization, but the HR team themselves. Did you know that if you hired 10 Emiratis and you lost 10 Emiratis, you have 30 days to backfill them?
Wow.
So you can imagine thing that's really happening. And one of the observations I realize in organizations, unfortunately, they look at the short term. Yes. So they look at the short term. How many I hire today, hire this today, and hire them anywhere. And they do not look at the organic, where the competitive advantage of this Emirati. And there are a lot of them that comes out and they say to the Emiratis as well, you can imagine yourself, fresh graduate, someone tells you, come work with me and I'll give you the world. And the minute you step in, you're completely ignored. Yeah. So you imagine how disappointing is that for someone to get shocked, in his first day trying to go to work. And I'm not saying organizations are like that, but telling you how stressful it was for organization to pitch as far and as strong as they really want. That's number one. Number two, most of the Emiratis were clustered on frontliners. So I can tell you confidently with my experience and views, 90% of the total population of Emiratis in the private sector were pulled in for entry-level roles. So you can imagine young professionals, no chance. You can imagine leadership, no chance. Managers, no chance. So they were all position directed at people frontliner. So when you have a frontliner coming and going, and you have a supervisor have to run his operation, and I'm telling you an insight and the mental stress that this caused them, they got exhausted by hosting instead of running a department of 5, having 2 trainees. Now these two trainees are shuffling, are becoming 2 and 4. So you can imagine the tremendous amount of stress over the supervisor and the people that have to look after the Emiratis training. And since the attention is not there, and remember the story when I told you I struggled for attention among 20 siblings because my parents were paying attention to so many. And the same thing with the supervisor, how far he's going to go in terms of knowing, did you come to work? What did you do today? Did you learn this? Did you achieve that? So it becomes also tremendous stress. It becomes also tremendous stress on the Emiratization in charge in that organization, and the stress on the leadership, because companies hold brands. So when they see Emiratis coming and leaving and talking badly about their reputation, that becomes also stress, let alone the shock Emiratis gets when they come to the private sector, because they have to learn how to work long hours. They have to learn how to work 6 days a week. They have to learn that sometimes they cannot go home on Friday and have lunch with their families. So and most of the talent that I saw in Emiratis, when they come to work, they may be filled with ambitious and stuff, and we're known of being a little bit impatient. And I think the new generation everywhere around the world, their span of attention is very short and getting really shorter. So they make very quick decision of leaving within a day, a week, and just jumping roles. I know I can tell you a real story of a bunch of Emirati women hired to do a specific roles, and the roles require them to work in retail and operations and in rotation. And suddenly a competitive comes and just takes them over 500 dirhams more, promising them morning jobs only. So you can see how messy it became. And organizations shifted from being authentic in their talent programs to become inauthentic. They are just trying to get by the end of the year or every half of the year, so they're not fined by the regulatory. But are they really honestly believing in that inclusion and giving these 10% is not much, by the way, Charlotte and Sam. 10% of a total workforce over 5 years is not a lot.
It's nothing,
and it's doable.
I want to come back to your point, your question, Charlotte, about the well-being. But I think what I'm hearing, Fatima, is that the system has been set up with, as I kind of mentioned, with there's fines if you don't do this, and so people are ticking boxes, and so essentially what that's doing is actually creating this resentment towards it, when in reality what we need is and I do a lot of work in this in terms of like, what is the purpose of this? And then, so in reality, how helping people understand the value behind diverse thinking in a workforce and having local knowledge in a workforce, and actually setting that as the goal, and rather than saying you have to fill a quota. Granted, maybe that's a good idea to get it moving, but then how does that sort of translate or move into a world where this is actually really valuable to you? It's going to give you a competitive advantage, which you said, right? And it's going to help your workforce be more rounded and think more broadly, right?
There is a proof in different research about high diversity and inclusion and how local talent can really beef and open doors for your business, especially as a foreigner, or open doors to understand your marketing campaign and culture, because you have someone who is from the land and understand the setup and situation. You said something extremely important, Sam, right now. Part of my work, and what I really think is extremely important, is to change the whole philosophy in the organization. So in their philosophy of talent, they have to embrace the DEI, but also embrace Emiratization under it at the same time. Then it becomes authentic. If I go out as an organization, talk to Emirati talent, tell them I have the best interest for you. If it comes from philosophy, from the heart, it will be very easy to sell, right? And instead of just a quick cut and a quick pace, like we really started saying. And so this is one. The second thing is you also touched a point. I write on LinkedIn, and I write my thinking freely since I started my company. And one of the articles I wrote, or two articles, one of them is when localization go really far, which means you don't have to go blindly just localizing. You have to not go that far. And also, if one day the United Arab Emirates can be the example for the region when it comes about running a framework of agenda that concerned about DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion, and the Emiratization is really part of it. Apart from that, I don't know, Charlotte or Sam, but you know the UAE in the past 2 years set a global ambition when they wanted to be the top 10 cities in the world that have the most diversified talent. And that's why you have the employment insurance being approved recently in the past 2 years, and the golden visa been really progressed very fast for talented people to come and stay and work in the UAE. So there's a combination of balance between Emiratization and at the same time the interest of the country itself to bring talent from outside as well. So how can we really juggle between the two unless we really put them together?
Yeah, and it's moving away, isn't it? Like you said, from those blind tactics. And there's one example that springs to my mind that I've witnessed, which is where the organisation basically hired a bunch of Emiratis. They were being paid their salary. They had all of the benefits that they basically requested and wanted, but they never had to come into work. So the impact that then had on everybody else at the workplace, because they were aware they now had to basically do all of that extra workload. So the word that Sam used earlier about resentment coming into place was like really, really heightened. And I think, like you've said, there's like, if we can move away from those blind ideas and move into integration and really embodying this in organizations, then we're more likely to be able to fulfill that balance, right, between talent for the economy and the localization piece. So I guess the question then is how, like somebody listening to this, is how do they start to really make organizations inclusive with all of this in mind?
Fantastic. Do you mind, Charlotte, if I gave you an example at the expo? Because I can talk about textbook from today until tomorrow and everybody can really preach, right? But I must go back and really give you a real example. A World Expo has happened in the UAE for the first time in the region in 2020. So we won in 2013 and we were preparing for it massively in 2016. And I was asked to put an Emiratization program 2018. But for me to put an Emiratization program, I did not know what to benchmark it with because it's not a bank, it's not a sector, it's a mega event. So where to go from there? And I had a conversation with Her Excellency Rim Al-Hashimi, who is the managing director. And I asked her, what does she aspire out of this? Because we don't have talent that made an expo before to make sure that we're bringing them. And she asked me to put a program where we can really bring diversified talent to play a part and be in this journey with us, and at the same time for a know-how or knowledge transfer to happen, so we have a legacy of Emiratis that can run mega events in the future for the country. So that was the key that brought it. So now you bring 90% of your talent from outside the country. For the first time, they come in the UAE and they see Emiratis maybe at a workplace or they hear about Emiratization, right? So for me, the question started from the beginning. When we employed them, we did not put anything in the contract, but the question was in their induction, how did you learn what to do today before you become the way you are? Where did you learn this from? And they said, oh, I remember my supervisor, the program, this company put this. And I explained to them, like you created your career through these initiatives. We have an initiative called Emiratization. We're bringing young talent for you. So you try to program all the people that come from outside the country for the first time and induct them about this vision of leaving a legacy. So the philosophy and the programming started from there. There was nothing written in there. And as a human being, they came voluntarily saying, you know what, really, we learned from someone may believed in us and we should really continue. And that's why the whole campaign of Emiratization was, we believe in you. And it worked tremendously and successfully through them. So I really honestly think, number one, organizations have to be very authentic and their talent, everybody is accountable and responsible. They have to buy in the idea and the philosophy of inclusivity in general, or including the Emirati talent. I also think the framework has to change of the regulatory, because if your framework saying, I incentivize you because you need to hire a certain amount of Emirati, or I say I incentivize you if you also train Emiratis, if you also contribute to the communities, if you also do cultural workshops for people to do so. If you brought a lot of students from universities, if you went to universities and did program for them that really enabled them or upskill them. So the framework itself has to really change. The line managers of Emiratis, by the way, I ran a survey just to explain how critical it is to presume and assume all the diversified talent you have managing Emiratis are confident and they know and they don't need any support and they're perfect in their people management. Actually not. Because when I ran a survey internally to test how confident these supervisors were giving Emiratis to deal with, they said 50% of them, they said, we never dealt with an Emirati before. So we're dealing with them with the gloves. And another 50+% saying, I have never seen this guy before. I was not involved in the recruitment. So you can imagine it's an agent brought to him by HR and he'd been told suddenly to fall in love with him and teach him.
Wow.
Or something like that. So there are a lot of attributes that contribute to the success when we really talk about it. Private sectors blame the education system and they say the education system is not agile enough to bring skilled Emiratis or talent to come. But actually the private sector, they're forgetting they have to really start conversing and having dialogues with the universities as early as year one and inducting the importance of or the potential of jobs that these students could have with them when they really leave. Emiratis themselves have to be also educated. It's not about money and it's about how, what kind of career you can build yourself when you start in your day one and how can you be grateful to supervisors, leaders, because they really taught you how they upskilled you to be able to do such a job. And it's easy to jump from place to another. So there are four different aspects into it, Sam and Charlotte. And without jumping into the details, to say to solve this, these four people have to sit together, address the gaps, and synergize. Not everybody works silo and alone.
Yeah, 100%. And I have a mentor, a lady named Louise Mara, who lives in New Zealand. She's a New Zealand Māori lady, and she actually challenges me on the word inclusion, because inclusion into what is her mantra, right? And so what you've just said there, those four people sitting together is kind of the nexus of her idea is co-creation, right? It's not. And Charlotte and I buy into that theory wholeheartedly, because that's what we do with Wellbeing Leaders, right? Is what do you guys think? What do you need? And so in reality, because you've talked a lot about private sector, system, education, government as well, essentially, and then and the Emiratis themselves, it's like what we need to have a conversation. What's actually going to work? What do you need? And so when line manager X gets a new Emirati employee saying, hey, how do you like to work? What are you used to? Here's what my needs are. What are yours? And I don't think that's the norm, is it, in terms of people having that kind of conversation?
I attended so many conferences and places where I've realized one, if not more than one, missing on that in that dialogue. Because in companies, we're comfortable sitting behind closed doors, making decisions about how our campaign should look like, what's the trend, what's our neighbors doing. But there's no real consultation of the new generation of the talent of what can I do today to attract you. And the same comes when it comes to people of determinations, for them to be included in the conversation. We ask them, what can we do to make sure that you're included and you're not left alone. Government are doing tremendous amount of efforts. Having said that, it's still not enough. You know what's missing, Sam and Charlotta? What's missing is an entity, a committee actually, overseeing all this conversation and integration of these parties involved in the ecosystem of Emiratization or talent inclusion. That's what's really missing, because now the education system works kind of alone. The private sector works alone. Emirati talent, of course, they don't work alone. They sit and wish the world changed for them alone. And I did not really see actually a collaboration between the four happening under one committee and one umbrella. And this could be the solution, is you need someone to lead the boat, right? Not everyone does differently. We need someone to lead the boat and to have a conversation with everyone and create the closure of the gaps, as we say, across all the sectors.
That's exactly what we've been talking about with regards to well-being, right? And I think inclusion is a big piece of that, if not a big bulk of that. You know, it's if we are kind of muddling through and trying to figure it out and there is no central leadership, it's going to look different from place to place. So I think there's definitely a real good systemic change that can happen that will drive the change. Can we zoom in perhaps to the organization level? Because right now that isn't the case, right? There isn't a unified leadership specifically in these areas. So what does a leader in an organization, where can they start practically? And I think you've just obviously gave away a lot of the clues there around the collaboration, the talking, the consulting, the people that are involved in this. But is there anything else that you would say to leaders if you had like 100 of them in a room and you could get them to leave doing just one or two things? What would they be?
I can speak out of self-experience, actually. I think leaders have to be extremely passionate about inclusion.
Yes.
If you're not passionate, there's no point of pretending, because you want to look, you want your organization to look mature and within the standard of global talent practices. You have to really believe in inclusion. You have to take it personally, because once you take it personally, it works. Otherwise, it fakes out. So I think the third thing is leaders should not hold the boat alone. They should hold everybody accountable and responsible, and it has to be a joint responsibility. It's not an HR job, nor Emiratization manager job, or their job. It should be everybody's job. The peer, the subordinate, the supervisor, the function manager in this mission, and they all have to have a say. I rarely see companies consulting their people about inclusion.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, love that. The Okay, so I mean, I feel like we could go on about this all day. Absolutely talk about this all day. And I think one of the things we always like to ask Fatima with all of our guests is one thing that they want to for the win in well-being and one thing for the bin. So what are your two wins? What's your win and your bin for well-being in organizations?
I don't know. I don't want to use big words and big jargons, but I think self-leadership is extremely important, or self-awareness. You have to be self-aware of who you are and what you are. What are your challenges as a leader? And the second thing is, how can you really be a leader that enable others to deliver? I reported for a lady at the expo. She was not an Emiratization on HR expert, but she created the world for me to be successful. So that meant a lot, and that really transformed the way I really think. So I really honestly think it's extremely important that we are self-aware of, and we are self-disciplined, and we lead ourselves first before we start leading other people. And I extremely believing in or creating the environment for others to be able to be free to be and free to become.
I love that. And what about for the bin? What do you want to see thrown away?
I honestly see a lot of leaders always stand talking high, and then they don't really listen. They talk a lot and they assume a lot. And I think the best thing that leaders could really do in an agile environment is sit back and just listen and let people talk. And if you don't have much to say, I think it's important that you thank the person for putting this on the table. But a lot of leaders jumping in the middle and trying to state their mind and say that they really know it all. That kind of thing. So I really think leaders should start giving that away. And I talk about it from experience, because sometimes sitting silent and observing and empowering people to have that conversation dialogue in front of me, and many things can come up. But you see a lot of leaders, they hold authority and they steer the thinking and they steer the whole thing. And you lose a lot of solutions and opportunity of creativity and people to speak up.
Yeah, that's the beauty of diversity of thought, isn't it? If you stifle that by speaking over it, you're never going to get it onto the table, are you?
Yeah, empathy is very important now that you spoke about the table, because sometimes I think leaders could do more being empathetic, but also at the same time they have to balance and to be balanced in empathy. You see leaders sometimes they stand behind equality and they want to empower women in the table, which is okay, you want, but let's not go too far in it, empowering women or a person with disability, because sometimes we make emotional decisions out of imbalanced empathy. So we have to also, as leaders, learn how to be empathetic, and also at the same time balance what it means to become a wise business decision.
100%. It's finding that blend, isn't it, that works. So Fatima, what is there that perhaps we haven't asked you that you would like to share on this podcast? Bearing in mind our listeners are people who are perhaps leading organizations at that top level, but we have a lot of kind of mid-level leaders as well, mid-level managers that are kind of really trying to do their best. Sometimes they get a little bit of limitation perhaps in their space. Is there anything that you feel like you want to share with them directly?
What worked for me at work, personal level, is you do not sit and wait for someone to open doors, permit you looking across your shoulders for anybody's approval. If you really believe in something, just jump in. And the best example I can give is when I wanted to bring people with determinations to the expo, a lot of people were afraid that I'll fail. And I just jumped in completely, and the project became extremely popular at the end. So what I really wanted to leave people with is that, and from a personal journey, for me to drive for 2,500 kilometers all the way to Iraq, which is dangerous for a single mom and a single woman like me in this age on a motorcycle, I really learned that if you really want something and you're passionate about it, you put your head into it, you don't have to really wait for anyone to clap for you or tap in the shoulder. And so if you really believe in inclusion, if you're passionate about anything in terms of business, trust me, people can really see it and feel it. And maybe we hesitate a lot and we consult a lot before we jump into something we are in love with and passionate about and we want.
Yeah. Someone said to me yesterday, the world is full of people who are waiting for things to happen. The successful people are the ones that do. Right. So yeah, awesome. Fatima, thank you so much. This has been a super rich conversation. I'm really grateful for you sharing your thoughts and your wisdom, and I know Charlotte will be too. And so yeah, we just want to I just want to say thank you. Where can people find you?
Well, I am on LinkedIn, super active, and I also at the same time have my website of Born to Localize, where they can really approach and send me through. Sam and Charlotte, thank you very much for this opportunity. I really, really love what you guys are doing, and I'm excited to see more out of this.
Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on the show. But not only thank you and obviously feeling that gratitude is congratulations for what you're doing and what you're achieving and really like leading the charge on this, because I think I can only imagine some of the challenges perhaps you haven't shared on today's conversation that have really maybe made this not as easy as what it could be. And but yet you're showing up, you're showing others how it's done, and it's really inspiring for us. So thank you again so much.
Thank you again. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you.